We don't support more rules and regulations to fall under. When this trust was first negotiated, we were exempt from, a lot of the titles, Title IV, Title VI, Title VII, Title III, except for our particular trust as a way of settlement so we could run our trust in an efficient manner, which we've done.
Okay, can you hold on for a moment? Ms. Mahoney had a question.
I just had a clarifying question because you had indicated that you're already, because it is the same essentially as the Alaska state statutes, but then you just said that you would have additional rules to follow. So I'm curious what those would be, because you had said that you were already completely doing them.
The additional rules would be under Title III, which we're exempt from.
I know. Well, what would they be? The additional work that you would need to do in comparison to what
I didn't say additional work, I said additional rules. Title III also includes the personnel rules, which we're not subjected to.
Okay, so it's the personnel rules.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. The second ordinance revision that the internal auditor brought up actually was really clarified at the last meeting that we had, in that Pete testified that really this didn't pertain to the trust, but it was a municipal issue, and I don't even think we took much time in addressing it. Which brings us to number 3, what Lauren was talking about, being exempt from Title III, Title VI, Title VII, where the internal auditor thought we should fall back under those titles. Again, this trust was set up to be exempt from those titles. We've operated very efficiently, very forthright. We've provided great reimbursement programs for our members. We've not had any major issues within the trust that are any concern as far as that goes. And we just find that being hamstrung by being under Title VI, Title VII, and Title III would increase the costs associated with our operation of the trust. Therefore, the board voted at our last board meeting not to support this ordinance change.
Was it unanimous?
I believe so.
Just curious.
I believe it was unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Are you done, Everett?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Raskus?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. In the audit, it has like on page 7, subsection C at the top, management comments. Who are the management comments from? Since they're different than what they're saying.
From the chairman,
So,
at the assembly, that's the recommendation of the assembly.
so when management stated concur, the assembly will, okay, so it was the
Consider
assembly
it.
chair who is the management that's commenting. Okay.
And I think that the chairman asked LD to do this, to clarify what need to be changed, if it's to be changed.
Well, I don't think the chairman asked me to do it. I'm doing this because
Anyway,
my responsibility as the chair of the audit committee. But, so management comments are from who?
from the assembly,
Okay.
Why would
only
they,
in those cases where we address the assembly.
pardon this?
Only in those cases where we address the assembly, like this one here. We recommend the assembly consider revising the MC, and
Right,
then I got a response from the chairman saying they will consider it.
okay.
Okay. Ms. Raskus?
Yeah, so continuing, I mean, why would you consider, because when I read this, I thought it was the trust that was the management. It's their program. So what's customary? Is that customary when you do an audit to go to the assembly? If it's a recommendation that requires assembly action?
Right.
Okay.
We try to address the recommendation to whoever can take the action. So the board could take no action in any of this report.
Right.
They never have in the past. It's either employee relations director, in this case, it's the assembly, because we're talking about revising the code.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. I see, Pete. So in other words, whatever the audit addressed, assembly action, the chairman of the assembly was the person who responded. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Okay, Everett, anything else?
I was just going to point out in the prior audits, it's always been employee relations that have addressed the management comments, and that's been in the last internal audits. So this is kind of odd to me that the assembly's responding to the management comments. Usually it's the municipality.
We've never recommended the change to the code.
So in other words, what you're saying is the only reason why the respondent was the assembly chair is because it referenced the assembly making a change to the code.
Exactly.
Okay, okay, thank you. All right, anything else, Everett or Lauren? You want to say before we move on?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now I'd like to hear the administration's response to the board's recommendation. And we just got this memo just now, and I'm not complaining about it, 'cause that's
Well,
how life goes.
unfortunately, I'm sorry.
That's okay, but if you wouldn't mind summarizing the administration's position, thank you.
Well, that was the first thing I wanted to clarify, Madam Chairman, is that this is not, the administration hasn't taken a position. What the administration has done is pointed out some fundamental flaws in the way the relationship works right now. And, you know, as I did not, unfortunately, have the benefit of seeing their response until it was handed out this morning, you know, I wouldn't disagree, personally, I wouldn't disagree that the trust, were they to have their own employee, would not be subject to Title III. That's fine. But Lauren, under the current structure, the person who's providing the support services isn't their employee, his municipal employee.
Being paid for though by the trust.
No, being paid for by the municipality.
Okay.
Correct. So I think that what we have is a disconnect between what was envisioned in the ordinance and the authorities that went with the ordinance and the way it's operating right now. And as I've said from the beginning on this, I just see something that needs to be fixed. I don't have a position per se about which direction to take. Reading the ordinance, it anticipates that the trust would have their own employee and that we would provide funding for that employee, not that it would be a municipal employee. Clearly, there was a period of time where this has evolved, that in the interest of getting them up and started, the municipality employee relations specifically provided one of their staff members to help them get up and get going and start with the program. The ordinance didn't envision that was going to go on forever. It was a startup intention, and now it's become almost historical fact that that's the way it's done. And I think that sets up some real problems. And some of the problems were pointed out in the internal audit. You know, the ordinance says we will fund one administrative position. There was some slop over, and Pete pointed out some areas where we were picking up additional costs that we shouldn't have, and management's response was shame on us. We shouldn't have been providing that additional financial support to them, and we've corrected those things. But the practicality of the way it works right now is, and all I did in this memo really is point out some of the practical problems of having a municipal employee who is directed by a board. The board is accountable for his actions, but the municipality is accountable under Title III for all of the personnel actions, workers' comp, the personnel rules, FLSA, compliance with all of the kinds of things that are there. So some of the things I pointed out just in a few bullets is that first is that the board, at their discretion, has assigned additional duties to this position that were not necessarily envisioned in the original ordinance. It was a general administrator. I think the word specifically is a professional administrative generalist that's there. I mean, that's not intended to be the plan administrator necessarily. It's fine that Lauren's doing it, but our obligation to fund a position didn't encompass these additional duties. The practicality of having a municipal employee under the direction of an outside entity, some of the things that are a concern, and I just put them down here as questions. What if one incurs overtime? You know, who's going to authorize that overtime, and whose budget is that going to come out? Where's that money coming from? because the authorization for that overtime and the compliance to FLSA, the overtime laws, because Lauren is overtime eligible, who does that liability fall to if we're doing it wrong? Currently, my understanding, and I don't have all the details, but my understanding is that the board did provide some additional benefits to Lauren in terms of tuition for his continuing education. There's a municipal policy for municipal employees associated with providing tuition assistance for continuing education. My understanding of what was done was not in compliance with those rules. So they're providing an additional benefit to a municipal employee, and what does that raise in terms of the ethics associated with that, or that? I mean, I raised the question, I don't have the answer. And I'm particularly concerned about some of the internal controls. I don't know who is approving expenditures, I don't know who's approving leave, I don't know who's approving overtime, I don't know who's approving travel, because all of those activities, although a municipal employee and subject to Title III, for all of those policies, liabilities, workers' compensation, all of those kinds of things, is being carried out by a board.
So can you hold that for a moment?
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
so can you answer the question that she just asked? Who's approving the travel, et cetera, et cetera?
Currently, it's the trust board.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. So these are the practical considerations that have come up. And it continues that you start at the top, you sort of start at the top question, which is this a municipal employee or is it not? And clearly, the position as it currently exists is a municipal employee. He's in the PERS system. He is subject to all the rules that are there. He's under the direction of an outside board. And again, I believe that if you go back and you look at the ordinance, it's very clear that what was envisioned is that the board would have its own staff. And we, I mean, I will say that the administration, as I say, we haven't taken a position. We see a problem that needs to be fixed. And I've mentioned this on a number of occasions, if they wanted to go ahead and say, that's fine, just give us the money, you know, we would gladly hand over all of those obligations for personnel management and so on and so forth to the board, and we would enter into a letter of agreement that says we'll provide an adequate level of funding for one professional administrative generalist. And therefore they would not be subject to Title III or any of the personnel rules. That's one option. The other option, Madam Chairman, that is anticipated or at least mentioned in the ordinance is the possibility to merge these activities from a day-to-day administrative standpoint with the Police and Fire Retirement Board. They have many common functions, investment management, fiduciary responsibility, not to merge the boards, but personally, I think you could get some efficiencies of scale associated with the administrative support being housed in the same place. And there is a reference in the ordinance that would imply that that was a possibility that was anticipated when the ordinance was originally written. The third option, which frankly is not my preference, but if in fact we want to enter into a continuing letter of agreement with the trust with respect to essentially what we would be doing is providing contract services. The municipality would be providing contract services with the municipal employee to the board and let them run through it. Then we have some control over how that service is performed. I think all of this sort of started when I'm looking at my budget and I'm saying we're paying plus or minus $120,000 a year for a full-time administrator when to administer a program that has not very many beneficiaries. Help me. Lauren, how many beneficiaries now?
400.
About 400 beneficiaries. We can get a third-party provider, as the municipality does, that provides all of the administrative services of claims management, administration, customer service, those kinds of things, for about $25,000 or $30,000. for that number of employees.
Do you really
And
think
that
that's all
was,
it would cost?
pardon me?
Do you really think that's all it would
Well,
cost?
that was the cost that was estimated to us when we actually went out and asked the question.
How long ago was that?
6 months ago when this first came out.
Thank you.
So I think that there are more efficient ways to provide the administration. And so I guess where I'm going with this is that if the expectation is that the municipality is going to provide a service to the board in this respect, we need to look at the most efficient way to do it. If the board wants to provide the services themselves through their own employee, then let's enter into a funding arrangement that would allow the municipality to give them the funds to be able to do it the way they want to do it.
Okay.
So, thank
Before
you.
I ask, you're welcome, thank you. Before I ask for audit committee comments, I would like to give you an opportunity to respond to the administration's
Yeah,
comments, if you'd like.
Yeah, yes. I'd like to respond to Nancy's comments. Nancy and I have talked about some of these things that she's telling all of you here today. And, I mean, I've got to admit, some of the things that she's talking about are things the board does need to consider. And we do have a strategic planning committee that we've been trying to hold for the last 2 months, but because of the audit committee and different things that we've had going on, we've had to postpone it. So we have a meeting coming up on Tuesday where we're going to be addressing a lot of these different things. Look, I don't know if some of those things can happen or not. I don't know if some of those things are legal or not. We're going to explore those things, and if there are changes that need to be made, the trust is going to bring those changes forward. I mean, when we negotiated this trust, we were given the ordinance that says we're the final authorities on all things pertaining to this trust. The board takes that seriously. We will consider those things. We will work with the municipality on some of these ideas, like the third-party administrator. If it proves to pan out to be cheaper, why wouldn't we do that? But we don't have that answer yet. And because you throw a number out there that you think can be cheaper, and it might be, we don't know the true answer yet. We're going to explore those and some other things. As far as whether or not our employee, that our position that Lauren currently fills could be a contract employee, I think we do need to look at that. But then we're also going to have to look at the trust laws too. Will we still be a tax exempt entity under the municipality if Lauren is no longer a municipal employee? Those are questions we're going to have to ask, because when we got this thing tax qualified in Washington, D.C., this was kind of an unusual trust. The IRS had not seen a trust like this anywhere else in the country. And the fact is that the municipality had very little, direction over how the trust was going to operate. And so if Lauren is no longer a municipal employee, I don't know how that's going to affect that. But these are all things that we have to discuss, we have to research. But making these ordinance changes now, this isn't the right way to go. I mean, maybe later on down the road, where we've had a chance to converse with the municipality on some of these issues, we may bring something to the assembly saying, here's the direction we want to go. And that's the time to make those ordinance changes. I just think we're premature right now to do that.
Okay. Well, the good news is nothing's happened yet. That's the good news. With that said, I'd like to give the audit committee an opportunity to comment, and we'll start with Mr. Mooney.
I think the audit committee should establish a goal that says we need to set up a task force that consists of a municipal employee as well as a board employee. And the goal of the task force is to identify the most efficient way to deliver services to the 400 beneficiaries. And this entity, or this task force, then should evaluate the 4 different options that Nancy presented. And if there are others, I mean, they should be on there. And we should establish a timeline for a report to come back to the audit committee with a full analysis of each of the options so that we can make a decision.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Raskus.
Ditto,
Okay.
that's fine.
Mr. Taylor?
Ditto.
Okay, Ms. Drummond?
Thank you, all of you. I appreciate the insight, particularly that the IRS had never seen a trust like this anywhere in the country. I find over the years that there's some really unique situations in Alaska, and I don't know why we insist on reinventing the wheel up here. It's maybe because we don't have another, nearby large organization that we can go compare to. I don't know what that is, but I appreciate all of the suggestions, and I think we should proceed.
Okay, does anybody else have any comments before I
Madam Chair.
make some comments? Mr. What's your name again?
That guy.
Wheeler.
Our office rendered an opinion to the board in early March on the issue of whether or not the position is a municipal employee or not. And our conclusion, they are currently. So I would, as it points out all the problems that Nancy mentioned for us, but in addition, there's significant exposure to the municipality with respect to having an employee over there that doesn't come under our direct supervision. There's all sorts of liability issues that come up that need to be resolved. Because if we're not in a position to use our personnel code to monitor what that employee does and how they do it, then we've given ourselves an open-ended exposure, and it shouldn't be that way. We've revisited this issue over and over again. As the board's note says, this issue has come up over 16 years. We did some opinions in 2004 on the same subject, so I would strongly urge the folks that are involved in this to not let it linger, that we do need to get it resolved, because that exposure every day is there.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mahoney?
Yes, Mr. Wheeler, do you think it would be appropriate for legal participation on the committee? I mean, are the trust administration rules and the legal rules such that it would drive the decision and the analysis of the different options?
We'd be happy to participate. Right now, our department and the board have a strong disagreement on what is the status of this employee. So we would love to be able to participate and offer our side of the coin.
Then you should add a member and then.
Okay, sorry, I got sidetracked for a minute
Yeah.
here, sorry. But, yeah, I just want to make a couple of comments, but, you know, I'm pretty familiar with the structure. I've been around for a long time, and I remember when Carol Watts was the administrator. And I'm really glad to see that this is the first time I've ever heard of any municipal liabilities in all the years that I've been familiar with this. So I'm glad to see that that's brought to the attention of all of us. I really appreciate the fact that the chair of the board talked about a strategic planning committee, has discussed the issue with Ms. Usera, and wants to work with the administration to resolve some of the issues and come back with some recommendations. I also appreciate the fact that Ms. Mahoney is suggesting that the audit committee put together an ad hoc committee, and I would really appreciate it if you would put what we need to do in writing. It would be much easier for me to establish that, and we can get busy and get going on this like right away, so that we don't have liabilities hanging out there. Your committee is going to meet pretty soon, did you say? Tuesday. And I really would appreciate it if you could get back to this committee as soon as you possibly can, when you come up with some recommendations. But we're going to be working consecutively. You're going to work with your board, we're going to work with our committee, and then we can come back to the table, hopefully maybe in a month, and bring both sides' recommendations to this committee for discussion and some resolution. Does that sound appropriate, folks? Okay, well, with that said, are there any other comments before we move on to the next subject, Mr. Raskis?
I'd like to point out that concerning the audit report, the actions that you've taken have addressed what we recommended satisfactorily, so I think we can close this report out and have the assembly accept it at a future meeting.
Thank you. Yes, I believe it's on the agenda for the 26th, but thank you for that, Mr. Raskin. It has been hanging out there for a while. Okay, folks, thank you, everybody, for your input. Have a great weekend. We have another subject. Yeah, the meeting's not over yet, folks. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, The meeting is not over yet, we have another subject.
What happened?
Give him a break. Yeah, good idea. Hey, Dan, why don't you join us, please, at the table? Okay, thank you. The next subject is internal audit report 2011.
Very good.
2011-02 online payment system. And, of course, I read this audit like the rest of you had, and I just thought that the findings merited further discussion at the audit committee level, so that's why we're here. And first off, I'd like to start with the internal auditor. Pete, if you can summarize your findings and recommendations
Sure.
for us, that would be really great. Thank you.
We were asked by the police department to look at their online payment systems, which is used for citizens to pay their traffic tickets online. And it was the first year of implementation. We found that the current system does not interface with anything in the police department. So when a citizen logs on to the system to pay their traffic fine, they can put anything they want to put in, and the system accepts it. So the amount that's owed can be different. The ticket can be all been referred to the court. It accepts it. And it's going to be a real problem because it's resulted in having to do a lot of refunds and having to tell the court reverse things. So we recommended that police departments study how they can link things together so when a citizen logs on, things pop up, like the amount of the ticket, where its status is in it, and how to pay it. We've talked to the Park Authority, and their current system for parking tickets links. So when a citizen logs on their system to pay it online, the amount of ticket pops up. It also pops up the status. And if it's the Internal Reflection Agency, it does not allow payment. So there's no refunds given. It's really a good way to do it. So I think the police department recognizes this problem, that it doesn't talk to anything, and it creates a lot of work for them too. The second thing looked at was a contract with the vendor that provides this system. We found that the contract has expired in 2008. So there really isn't a contract in place. Even though in 2010, APD was added to the expired contract. So we recommended that they renegotiate the contract and get a current contract in place. And that was that was all we found.
Okay, thank you. Administration's response to the audit, who's gonna, are you in the hot
I can
seat?
start. Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
The weaknesses that the internal audit pointed out in the police department system, which I'm sure they can talk to a little bit, were in the very early days of launching the system, and there wasn't really good coordination between police and treasury and the controller division. It was kind of a mess, and I think we all would admit that. We quickly tried to fix the immediate issues that were being generated. There were a lot of overpayments and refunds generated, and so it was a communication issue. But really, the real issue is a system issue, which is what Pete is pointing out. Since then, the police department and treasury have worked together with the third-party provider, which is Official Payments Corporation, and we now have a system in place. And treasury's demoed it, and I know the police has too, where it will auto-populate what the name is of the person, what the citation is, what the dollar amount, the exact dollar amount that's owed, and it'll let them confirm. They can't change it. It's like, this is what you owe, and then they go through the process and they pay it. That's a very good way of doing it, and it prevents the errors, and it's very clean. It's very confirming to the customer, and it's clean to the police department and to treasury, because treasury ends up doing the refunds. So that has been significantly fixed since this audit was launched, and we do appreciate, the focus on the trouble that we had in the beginning. There's no doubt there's a lot of trouble. The contract itself was expired, which is another good thing to point out, and we were a little bit caught off guard by that because we had thought it was an open-ended contract. It's not. It involves zero municipal funds. It's not a typical contract. All the costs are paid for by the user of the system. It's a convenience fee that's passed on to the customer. So it's not your typical municipal contract involving municipal money. It still needs to be an active agreement. And I've got my packet here. I just received my final bit of information yesterday from what we call OPC, Official Payments Corporation. And we will get that renewed. And we're proposing a sole source, again, 0 municipal funds. And what we're doing in there is we're getting it all together because we have transit, animal control, police department, treasury, and a lot of different departments that OPC serves through this convenience fee model. And it's all going to be in the current agreement, all laid out, all the different pricing and everything else. And so we're getting ourselves caught up and current because our plan is to have other departments continue to use OPC as a vehicle to provide e-commerce, e-payments, with the fee, the credit card fee being paid for by the customer. It's very, very expensive if the city has to absorb those fees. So that's what we've kind of set in place, and the police department has been very good about jumping on the issue and getting it fixed and having their IT people work with the OPC IT people and really take it to the level it needed to be at. So I think it's all been very positive and it's come together fairly fast.
So I just have one question before I refer to the committee. So all the overpayments and the refunds, has that all been taken care of?
Yeah, those have all been cleared out, and we're not seeing any of that activity anymore. It's gone away, and I think Becky, who's kind of the recipient of a lot of that, has commented that she's not been getting any of those repeat issues. And also, there were some issues where, in terms of the customer, do they pay the police department, do they pay treasury? It depends on where it is in the cycle, how old the ticket is. That also has been fixed by the system. There's a business rule built in there that if it's a certain age, they cannot pay at the police department website. It ends up going where it should go. So we've tried to address the major weaknesses, and I think I know it's a much stronger system now.
Thank you. Any comments from the police department?
I think Dan's done a good job of explaining it. We jumped on board with something and looked good in the beginning, but we found out pretty quick that, it wasn't working out as much as we hoped. And I think we've worked hard to fix those things.
Right.
And I think we agree with everything that he thought about.
Right. And I just want to make one comment, please don't anybody think for 1 minute that, I invited you to be here to discuss this audit further, like what am I trying to say here? Making a big deal and thinking that you've done something wrong or bad, because that's not the case at all. I'm just doing my responsibility as chair of the audit committee, like I said earlier. And I just want to thank Dan for his explanation, and I'm real happy that the city has payment online. Trust me, I use it all the time, not the police department part. But so it's a really good thing, and I'm just glad to see that things have worked out. And with that said, Ms. O'Malley, do you have any comments?
I'd just like to make an observation, and that is that when this system was built, it was prior to us really establishing IT governance. And with our IT governance, one of our key guidelines is end-to-end processing. And it's really looking at IT solutions from an enterprise perspective. And I think in the future, as we continue to do more e-commerce, there will be a lot more teamwork and collaboration and that enterprise view such that, if somebody puts information in online with OPC, then there will be a direct feed into the ERP system so that we really look to establish the most efficient process. And by doing that, hopefully up front, we will prevent the calamity that happened here with this system. So anyways, I always look at things and try to see what are the lessons learned.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's really where we're going.
Absolutely. Ms. Frasquith? Mr. Careless? Ms. Gentleman? Anybody else have any comments? Okay, well, we're ending this meeting early. Thank you for being here, and the meeting's adjourned.